Sword of Fire and Ice, Aether Vial, Mycosynth Lattice. These are just a few of the expensive, impactful cards from MTG's 31st expansion, Darksteel.
But we're not talking about those cards today. Instead, we're going to talk about the cards that are cheap, cards that are mostly $5 or less from Darksteel that are good in Commander. They are the sleepers. This is the Commander Sleeper series, and I don't know what I'm supposed to say, but we're starting the video. Highest level of gratitude to our patrons who power the channel through Patreon. Check out the Patreon link in the description to learn about monthly giveaways, VIP Discord access, and even our official playmat. Hello and welcome to the day.
Thank you for spending your time with us.
I'm Jake.
I'm Joel. Welcome back to another episode of Commander Sleeper series. Wow, it's been a while. We have not posted an episode of this series in a while, but Jake and I had the idea tonight and we were just like, man, that would actually be really fun. Let's go back and catch the next one. And it's Darksteel. We're going to get into our sleeper picks for Darksteel. But before we get into it, if you would go down there, hit that like button if you like the video. By the end of it, hit that dislike button if you don't.
It's the best way to support the channel with just the click of a button. So the Commander Sleeper series, instead of talking about the big cards from the set, the big money cards, the Swords of Fire and Ice, the Aether Vial, we're going to talk about the cards that are cheap. A lot of these cards today have one printing ever, meaning that's the only way that you can get it is from Darksteel. So we're going to talk about those cards. Hopefully you find something today that you can add to a deck that maybe somebody hasn't seen before.
Let's get into it. Jake, we are going to start off with 3 cards of a 5-card cycle. And the cycle is called the Pulses. The very first one here that we're going to look at is Pulse of the Forge. It's 2 red, 1 other, instant speed, which is critical here. It says Pulse of the Forge deals 4 damage to target player. Then if that player has more life than you, return Pulse of the Forge to its owner's hand. So the possibility seems fun here to, at the EOT, Pulse of the Forge, the opponent with the most life, get Pulse back into your hand, untap and take your turn.
Yeah, that's right. And what you should know, all of the pulses, these are all just one printing. They only exist in this set. This card gets better with any sort of damage amplification, any sort of damage doubling. So like a Fiery Emancipation, Furnace of Wrath, and then this card gets very good very quickly. And yeah, it probably starts to outpace your opponent's life totals and you're not able to get it back at a certain point. But yeah, the fact that you can get these pulses back, I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing here, but I do think that this is a very good card. Maybe not a top tier card, I think we can say. A lot of the cards on the Sleeper series are going to be more casual cards, but definitely cards worth considering if you're looking for cards that are, again, very budget and very niche and have, again, a very low print run.
I think that this one has some niche. You know, it's applicable in a deck that's some sort of group slug deck that's just throwing damage all around. It's sort of a fail-safe to keep that one opponent who is inexplicably staying high on life total, just to keep them down. I mean, 4, that's nothing to shake a stick at. That's a nice little chunk, you know? It's just
at
a little
instant speed, 4/3 EOT,
yeah.
like you said.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, dude.
It keeps that player within range of you. Or if you don't need to keep him in range anymore, it deals 4 damage and it goes away. And that's when it's least, you know, super helpful or super impactful in Commander. But that EOT, man, just keeping him in touch nearby. Jake, the next one is very similar except for drawing cards.
Yeah, that's right. So 2 blue, 1 other here for instant speed. Draw 2, then discard a card from your hand. Then, if an opponent has more cards in hand than you, return Pulse of the Grid to its owner's hand. So exact same thing like the red Pulse, except this one is going to represent a lot of velocity. And in decks like Muldrotha, for example, that you're going to want to fuel the graveyard, this is, I mean, it's really working for you in a lot of ways. Draw 2, discard something that you want in the yard. I mean, that's great, dude. I think that this card has a lot of legs, and again, being able to cast it more than once, like casting this thing twice, that represents digging through 4 cards. I mean, that's a lot of velocity on a card that you can continue getting back. Just, I mean, a lot of players like to have a full grip, and so I could see this card being in your hand the whole game.
I really like the thing that you said about discarding that card being synergistic to your strategy. At time of shooting this episode of Sleeper Series, Midnight Hunt has just or is about to release, and I've been working on the 2 Precon Commander deck lists for that for some upgrades, budget, and bling. Jake, Pulse of the Grid would work beautifully in the blue-black zombie deck that is Precon for Midnight Hunt. There is so much recursion, there's so much play this from your graveyard, count the number of zombies in your graveyard, that Pulse of the Grid has a lot more. It's a much more applicable card when you are pitching stuff into the yard, like with Muldrotha, like with zombies, that you may see again. I really like that, Jake.
Again, I feel like these are cards where I'm like reading them and I'm going, like, is the Hive Mind really like that powerful in MTG that people have just like missed these? Like, that just seems like such a good card that was worth consideration. And I think Pulse of the Fields is as well. We have the white Pulse here, so this is 2 white 1 other. You gain 4 life, then if an opponent has more life than you, return it to your hand again. So this is just a nice little bounce back. You know, if you're getting hit a lot, this is a good way to kind of stay up. And if you have other effects that synergize with life gain, repeatable life gain effects, sometimes you'll have an effect that says when you gain life you may pay X, and if you do, draw a card, for example. So this is going to synergize well with effects like those in a repeatable way. So I think that this card has legs as well.
This, of the 3 that are most playable and the 3 that we included of the 5 on this list, it seems the toughest to get back multiple times, because if you're in a life gain deck, if your life gain deck is working at all, you are probably way higher life total, right? And so getting this back in those types of decks is a little tougher. But if you do get targeted down and you're starting to get burned out, yeah, I mean, instant speed, 4 life back, untap your turn again. If you really need it, 4 again, you can cast it again, maybe get it back. Just trying to catch back up. It could act as maybe like a mana dump to catch your life total back up, cast it multiple times in the same turn.
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to look at it as well. If you do have enough mana untapped for these pulses, you can do them more than once. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting card. And the 2 pulses that didn't make it on the list were the green one and the black one, and that's because they are sorcery speed. You'll have to go check those out yourself if you are interested.
Yeah.
Joel, why don't you tell us about Shriveling Rot?
This was a black card that we wanted to include on here, and it's got a very niche applicable thing, but like Rise of the Dreadmarn, if you can pull this off as a board wipe or after a board wipe has happened, this is when you're absolutely getting a ton of value off of this. 2 black, 2 other, instant speed. You choose 1. Until end of turn, whenever a creature is dealt damage, destroy it, okay? Or until end of turn, whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller loses life equal to its toughness. This could be enormous in the right deck. If you're playing against a Krinko deck, if you're playing against a Lathril deck that's making an absolute metric ton of goblins or elves or what have you, wipe the entire board, and then for 4 more mana, play this and have them lose life equal to every single token that left.
Sure.
That's enormous.
And it's instant speed, so you could do it in response to one of your opponent's board wipes, right?
Right.
Or the first mode of the card, which is whenever creatures dealt damage, destroy it. This is a nice little acute effect that you can sneak in if an opponent did 1 tick of Pestilence, for example. So you'd be able to cast this. Now that Pestilence is not only going to kill everything off that 1 tick of damage, but now Pestilence is going to go away because there's going to be no creatures left on the board. So this is a fun card, a couple different modes here, kind of versatile. And it's also interesting because, like, say a combat step doesn't go well for you, or say a combat step between 2 opponents is interesting, you could just sneak in and now get a pseudo board wipe out of it whenever everybody does damage to each other just on the combat step. So this is a card that's sitting at like 35 cents that I think is definitely worth some consideration. A lot of the stuff in this series is very cheap, so the margin for loss is very low. Like, you're essentially going to be losing quarters and half dollars if some of this stuff goes south.
If it goes to 0, and there's no magic card that goes to 0.
Probably won't, right?
I mean, a huge 12/12 trampler coming at your face, as long as it doesn't have first strike, you can block with your 1/1 token, and then in response, Shriveling Rot, it gets that 1 damage dealt to it and it dies. It's essentially target creature gains death touch until end of turn in some cases. So
all creatures gain death touch.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting card. It is, Jake, interesting to me too. Normally this series is filled with permanents, with creatures and enchantments and artifacts, mostly enchantments and artifacts. We've started this one off with 4 instant speed spells in a row. So this one is a little bit of a divergence
format
from
breaker,
the normal.
right?
It's a format breaker for Sleeper Series. Let's get back to permanents and go with the normally least appearing permanent type on this series, which is creature. But Jake, I love this one. Fangren Firstborn, 3 green, 1 other. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature. You know, I don't really care about its toughness. I'm essentially thinking this is one I want to at least get 1 use out of, hopefully 2. But, you know, Avenger of Zendikar, Fangren Firstborn's on the battlefield. Swing with all your plants and your Fangren Firstborn. They're all getting +1/+1 counters. If you're running this, you're probably running a lot of counter strategy anyway, so everything is in the season to double, if you will.
That's right. And, you know, obviously living the dream with this card is it with a Whisper Silk Cloak on, right? Because then it's getting through unblockable. You're able to get that repeatable effect. If you are going wide, again, let's bring up Lathril again, for example, Ball of Elves that's able to just go super wide, super fast. You know, the amount of power that this can put on an attacking tribe of Lathril. You know, that deck is so powerful, maybe it doesn't need this card. Well, but again, as a budget card that's like 50 cents, it's a very fun way to amplify your board state. Again, those are counters. That isn't just +1/+1 until end of turn. That is going to persist, and that is going to make your board a lot bigger, a lot faster.
Right.
And yeah, like Joel said, if you have any sort of hardened scales or anything that's going to put additional counters on, Fangren Firstborn gets that much better.
Yeah, drop Ozolith on the battlefield for 1 mana. All those creatures die. Ozolith soaks up all these +1/+1 counters like a giant battery. It's just the potential for +1/+1 counter strategies is nuts. And so it makes sense to me why this one's not more expensive or not higher up on people's +1/+1 counter lists, because there are so many good +1/+1 counter cards. But if you want to play some sleeper cards, you want to spec on some cards that are a little cheaper, I think that strategy is always going to have play, and that card could get there.
Yeah, next up we have Heartseeker, and the reason this card is on the list, I know you're going to see that big equip cost, it's because there is a spicy commander that's going to allow you to just put this on for free. Heartseeker 4 for an artifact equipment, equipped creature gets +2/+1 and has tap, unattached Heartseeker, destroy target creature. So repeatable destroy effect, just targeted removal, with a big old equip cost of 5.
Ardenn is a great equipment commander, partner commander that is going to let you attach stuff for free. There's also stuff like Pure Steel Paladin that's going to really help you with equip costs as well. And so that equip of 5 to me is less of an issue just because of how many equipment enablers there are in Commander now. So for 4 mana, having a creature that this can just be equipped to for free, and as long as it doesn't have summoning sickness, you can tap it and destroy any creature. That's just seems really, really strong to me. Plus you get +2/+1 to boot, and that's not nothing. You know, normally this kind of effect would be cheaper cost, maybe cheaper equip, and then would only have that 1 gains tap, unattached, destroy it. But it really, I think, has some viability in an equipment build, especially if you've got some ways to cheat equipment costs.
Yeah, specifically for that deck, and then after that it loses a lot of potency because it's just so expensive to equip.
That's a lot of Sleeper Series though, and you'll see if you go back through some of the older episodes, you'll see that a lot of these cards are niched. A lot of these cards are very specific, or they would have already been picked up and played really widely.
Yeah, and this card is no exception. So 4, we have Lich's Tomb, 4 mana value. Artifact, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. Whenever you lose life, sacrifice a permanent for each 1 life you lost. So this card gets better the later you play it. So say your opponents get you down to 10, and then you slam down a Lich's Tomb. That's going to be a lot better than if you play this on curve on turn 4 while you still have 40 life, right? But this card is very interesting, and I think it's going to be best in like a token strategy where you're able to just sacrifice something that has very little value to you, if you're able to sacrifice a plant, for example, or just a multitude of plants, hundreds of tokens, this card can keep you in the game for a long time depending on how many permanents you have to sacrifice. I think it's an incredible card for at like around $1.
Yeah, this is the kind of card that combos really well with some backdoor win conditions. You know, set every player's life total to target player's life total. Once you've gotten down to the 1-0 range, you're playing Lich's Tomb. You're not losing when you do actually hit 0. Obviously, with Lich's Tomb, like it says, whenever you lose life, sack a permanent for each 1 life you lost. You think first, you go, oh, well, that's cool. If I don't have any permanents to sacrifice, you know, I'm just sitting there and winning with 0. But you're going to be forced to sacrifice Lich's Tomb last. That would be the last forced sacrifice. So you could potentially be sitting there with just Lich's Tomb on the battlefield, but you're like, I'm still in it, guys. You can't get rid of me. However, I do
lands,
like
nothing else,
right?
but the Lich's Tomb, you just floating in the air.
I can still do this.
Right.
I really like the potential of a backdoor win condition, and I've covered in some combo shorts some of these, like get your life total to 0, set everybody's life total to the lowest life total, and then, you know, everybody's at 0, but you can't lose. They all lose. You win at 0 with Lich's Tomb. This is the kind of card I love. I love the art. It's a very cool one. It's because it's so weird. The design is so strange and mechanic changing, rule changing, that I think more people don't play this, but it's an artifact, Jake, that I really like. And this is another one I like too. We always try to include at least one uncommon. We do focus on rares and mythic rares.
At least we had a uncommon equipment make it into the video, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I love when we can get one uncommon in there, because, you know, a lot of modern sets, they'll come without like $5, $10 uncommon, and, you know, scarcity will lead toward price hike on cards like that. Our pick for that one is Nemesis Mask. It's a 3-cost equipment with a 3-cost equip, and it just says all creatures able to block equipped creature do so. You know, Jake, we've got cards like a Firemancer, where if you don't have a snake with Death Touch, you create a snake with Death Touch. You put this Nemesis Mask on that snake somehow, it becomes a very tiny mask, or the snake becomes very large, and then you swing, and all of their creatures have to block my Death Toucher, and I get to pick what dies.
Sure. Or, you know, this is a great way to have a creature be a distraction, right?
Yeah, it's like an overrun, a backwards overrun.
Like, yeah, sure. You can have this something that's like going to have like a deal damage effect, and then, you know, whatever is able to get through because you have suited something up that is okay to die on Nemesis Mask. You know, everything's going to have to block it. So it's one of these cards where you're able to do neat little plays depending on how you equip it, where you equip it. If you do put it on something with Death Touch, then you're able to boost that creature's power. You can spread Death Touch out over multiple creatures. You can like get 2-for-1s out of a card like this, 3-for-1s in certain situations. So yeah, it's a really fun card. And again, for an equipment that costs, I think, like 30 cents, 35 cents, this is definitely a card worth considering if you're looking for interesting equipment.
Hey everybody, it's Joel. I'm sitting here editing this, and I just want to let you know this card has shot up significantly in price since we actually shot this video. We shot this before Professor released his werewolf deck tech that included a spellbinder combo in it, and that made the price of this card go up significantly, and it's kind of hard to classify it as a sleeper anymore. However, we had a discussion about the card, so we're going to leave it in. Okay, enjoy!
And here's another interesting equipment while we're talking about interesting equipment. 3-cost Spellbinder with imprint here. When Spellbinder comes into play, you may remove an instant card from your hand from the game. And whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you may copy the imprinted instant card and play the copy without paying its mana cost. So obviously, like premium removal on this, some sort of ramp spell is going to be the ideal. This card is amazing on anything with unblockable, because then you're able to make sure that you get whatever you imprint with the card. But this is one of those cards that, again, 50 cents, or it might be like, what, $2 this one, Joel? I think
it's like a $2 card.
Yeah, so this is going to be one of the higher end on the list. Again, we're not talking about all of the super expensive cards here, but a very interesting card with just one printing.
Just the potential to put this on a flying creature and imprint like Vampiric Tutor or Enlightened Tutor or mystical tutor, an instant speed tutor spell tied to a spellbinder on a little bird that just punches through, and then you get to go tutor exactly what card you want. That potential for me is so fun and so cool. And again, Jake, the amount of, making that equip cost 0 or equipping it for free to a creature that's running around nowadays, I think this card has much more viability than people are giving it credit for, and it's probably going to get a reprint because it just seems really cool.
And even if the creature gets killed, the card is still imprinted under this, so you can equip it on something else and you can get that effect again. So yeah, a very interesting card that I don't think is on a lot of people's radar, and maybe it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, last word here. We're going to end with last word. 2 blue, 2 other. It's an instant speed that cannot be countered by spells or abilities. And it just simply says counter target spell, Jake. If you want something freaking countered, last word will make sure that you're able to do that.
That's right. So where like counter spell is the best counter spell ever, right? It's just like 2 blue to counter target spell. For 2 extra generic mana, can't be countered by spells or abilities.
Yep.
That's it. It's just it's an oh crap button as well. It's a way to make sure that you are countering what needs to be countered.
Yeah, this is the mono blue version. It's going to be compared to Dovin's Veto and is sort of outclassed at this point by Dovin's Veto. Dovin's Veto is non-creature though. Last word is counter any spell for 2 more mana. Dovin's Veto is more of a negate that can't be countered, but I really do think that, if you're looking for premium counter spells, making sure that your counters can't be countered is very viable.
Yeah, I mean, in EDH, you have Force of Will that's going to be free when you're pitching a card. You have Mana Drain for 2 that's going to float a bunch of mana in your next main phase that you can use. Last Word is definitely slower than some counter spells out there, but the fact that it says can't be countered by spells or abilities is why we think it's a sleeper and why it might be worth your consideration as a 35-cent card.
Man, I love this series, Jake. I have so much fun every time we start to research these, going through sets that I did not play, especially, and finding those rares, those cards that were printed at Rare that are like 30 cents now.
Yeah, they just sit there and they're like, notice me, please. I get that the sword is there and everybody likes the sword, but I'm kind of cool too. Kind of cool. It's kind of like the vibe of these cards.